Hello, kumusta po sa iyong lahat? And thank you to the many organizers of this event. I'm Rudolph Santaromana, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to speak to you all today. As grandson of late ex-mayor Timoteo Santaromana, I share a belief of his and of my grandmother Matilde of the power of education and knowledge. As we have recently celebrated the 50-year anniversary of Luna National High School, we are reminded of his legacy, of this legacy and the belief of my lolo, which he has instilled in me and in all of his grandchildren. Today, I speak to you in fulfillment of advancing that knowledge by imparting some of the knowledge which I have attained in my current graduate studies in the field of energy engineering, a quest which has brought me to study in Europe, which is why I unfortunately cannot join you in person today. I have lectured about this topic in various high schools in the States and even to my alma mater, the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. My wish is to merely share some of the science behind the claims made in regard to the coal-fired power plant, and as someone who has spent the last years focused on the field of energy in a global perspective, I only wish to help improve your understanding of the implications of some of these actions, and to provide some insights on the claims as they will affect the Philippines, but more specifically how they will affect our beloved Luna La Union. The data and evidence which I will share with you today is publicly available, and thus you yourselves can access these documents for your own further research. Today's presentation will focus on three main aspects that are important to the discussion of energy. They are environment and health, the economics of energy, and alternative energy, or specifically renewable energy. By drawing on some of the published claims made in regard to this coal-fired power plant, together we can have a brief assessment and understand how this will affect us. Firstly, let us look at the science behind the technology and the specifications of the proposed plant. According to the information in the Environmental Impact Study, or EIS, as I will use it throughout the presentation, the plant will use supercritical pulverized coal technology. But what does this actually mean? Well, supercritical pulverized coal technology, simply put, uses coal combustion at extremely high pressures and temperatures than are normally used with regular coal combustion. This technology is more advanced and more efficient when compared to conventional technology, as you can see from this chart here, which shows the efficiency of various technology as they have been implemented through time, shown here on the x-axis. But this does not mean that this technology will have zero emissions. This supercritical technology is an improvement from older burning coal technologies, but it will create emissions of substances into the atmosphere, having local and regional effects. As can be seen from this slide, which is taken from the International Energy Agency, or IEA, with supercritical technology, we can estimate the amount of coal and the amount of emissions of carbon dioxide that will be produced per unit of energy, usually referred to as kilowatt hour. There do exist more efficient and lesser polluting technologies, as can be seen by this graph. For example, ultra supercritical technology is now becoming commercialized, while the current cleanest coal technology includes carbon capture and storage, as can be seen here in the top right-hand corner with CCS. These technologies are starting to become studied more and will be implemented in the coming decade. To understand the magnitude of this, let us do a brief calculation of the amount of emissions that can be seen from this plant. What is known is that the plant will have a gross capacity of 670 megawatts once both units are installed. As can be seen from this highlighted portion of the EIS of the project, which, by the way, this document is publicly available and accessible, and I will reference it throughout the presentation. So if you have not yet seen this document, I suggest having a look for yourself. But from this document, it is stated that they will burn about 5,000 tons of coal every day once both units are up and running, accounting for a conservative estimate that the plant will function at about 60% of its full capacity throughout the year. This is using a factor which we know as capacity factor. And this is accounting that the average capacity factor in the United States among coal plants is 63%, so we'll be conservative and use 60% for our calculations. But what this means is that in 1 year, the plant can produce about 3,500,000 megawatt hours, or about 3.5 terawatt hours of electricity over the course of the year. To put this number into perspective, that's enough electricity for more than 5 million Filipinos annually. And indeed, this electricity will go straight to a substation 160 kilometers away from the plant with high voltage transmission lines, as there is no demand for this much electricity within Luna. From the substation, the electricity will be transmitted throughout the Luzon electricity grid. This is a schematic of how typical cleaning technologies are implemented in a plant. From the mill, which is seen here on the far left, this is where the coal is pulverized. It is then moved into the boiler, which creates the heat needed to produce the electricity. Within the boiler, we can implement low NOx or low nitrous oxide burners that will reduce the production of this pollutant NOx. The exhaust gas, or as is known with power plants, flue gas, runs through several treatments, including electrostatic precipitators and flue gas desulfurization, before it was released out of the exhaust pipe of the plant, which is known as the stack here. Now, assuming the proposed plant will utilize the best available technologies in the world as collected from a survey across all countries, again, this data is coming from the International Energy Agency, the emissions with this production, now that we have quantified it, will result in about 3 billion tons of CO2, or about 3 trillion grams, about 1.5 million tons of nitrous oxides, or NOx, about 280,000 tons of sulfur dioxide, and about 150,000 tons of particulate matter. Now again, these results are estimated with the best available technologies, not average technologies. And it has been stated that they will implement these technologies, of course, at the plant at Luna. But of course, these systems are imperfect. And when dealing with such a huge amount of production, even with the best available technologies, and mind you, these are better than average technologies used in these calculations, the result is that where there were no previous emission sources, a new source of emissions will be present. And these emissions will be present every single year for the plant running at the capacity which we assumed, 60%, once both units are up and running. To put these numbers into perspective, we emit CO2 and NOx when running diesel engines. To get the same amount of NOx over the year, let us imagine a heavy-duty diesel truck driving round trip from Luna to Manila and back to Luna. This is about a 600-kilometer trip, round trip. Imagine the exhaust from the emissions of that one truck doing this trip every single day, 365 days of the year. Now, I would need over 12,000 of the highest emitting or dirtiest diesel trucks doing this every single day to get this 1.5 million tons of NOx from the stack of this plant. This collective result of the nitrous oxide emissions from this fleet of diesel trucks would come out of a single point source the stack of the supercritical pulverized coal power plant with the best available technologies and conservative estimates of the production of the plant. Thus, indeed, this calculation may even be low compared to what we could see once the plant is fully operational. Now that we've conservatively quantified these emissions, what exactly does this mean? Well, carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas which is linked with global warming. The effects of this emission are global and not local, and a bit more indirect, although we can attribute the increased emissions of CO2 to an increased incidence of typhoons, melting glaciers, and climate change. However, the discussion of CO2 can take an entire lecture in itself, so we will only focus on the remaining emissions, NOx, SO2, and particulate matter emissions, which have a more local and regional direct effects, including acid rain and deleterious health issues. Particulate matter and NOx, which are constituents that help form smog, cause many different respiratory diseases: stroke, heart disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, asthma, and other health issues. It is well studied, and PM and smog pollution has been estimated to cause 4.2 million and 250,000 premature deaths, respectively, in a study that was done in 2015. You can see this from the quote shown here from this study that was taken from the International Council on Clean Transport, or ICCT. These references will, of course, be made available to all of you so that you can look into these resources for your own reading following the presentation. This is Dr. Susan Annenberg, the co-founder of Environmental Health Analytics, which has consulted for various environmental organizations, including the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, on the health effects of these emissions resulting from diesel engines, which are one and the same with what we will see from the coal plant.
NOx emissions contained within exhaust from diesel trucks and cars and buses are released into the atmosphere, where they can form ground-level ozone and fine particulate matter, or PM2.5. Both ozone and PM2.5 are two of the most ubiquitous air pollutants around the world, and they're associated with a range of deleterious health outcomes, including respiratory disease, cardiovascular disease, and even lung cancer and early death. When these emissions are released into the atmosphere, they don't just affect the population of the local area, but they can travel over very long distances and affect air pollution and public health over regions and even the entire hemisphere. On-road diesel vehicles are associated with over 100,000 premature deaths every year, and the impact is greatest in China, India, and in Europe, where there are very large fleets of diesel vehicles and very large populations exposed to the resulting air pollution.
Now recall that these emissions will occur through the stack of the coal plant, as opposed to the exhaust pipes of trucks. And from that point source of the stack, the pollutants are carried through the air. According to the EIS of the plant, again shown here, through their air dispersion modeling calculations, the highest ground level concentrations are expected to occur 7 kilometers away from the plant, where 24-hour NO2 exceedances are predicted to occur. To give you an understanding of what this actually means, as the emissions are released through the stack from the plant, the goal is to let them disperse and dilute through the air. So as it falls to the ground, the concentrations can be measured at the ground level. With the nature of the prevailing winds coming off the coast, they have calculated that actually 7 kilometers away from the point source of the emissions, the greatest concentration of NOx will be reached. When they refer to exceedances, this means that the regulated allowable concentration of NOx is expected to be exceeded at this point 7 kilometers away from the plant. The way that regulations are set, they allow for the ground level concentrations to exceed the regulations at certain